Please welcome your NACSACon host from Sports Radio 610 The Drive, Ron the Show Hewley.
I appreciate that. Welcome to NACSACon 2024. I need to hear a little bit more than that. You've had your coffee. I saw some lady with a huge Red Bull out there. Come on now, have a good time. We're going to have a good time. There you go. You're in Houston. It's 85 degrees and it's October 22nd. I know many of you aren't used to this. I'll be honest, last night I had a dream, and in my dream, I was like, all right, this side's going to say NACSA and this side's going to say con. But I didn't account for a middle row, so I guess we can't do it. But I saw that guy over there. He was ready. He was ready. He was ready to stand up. He said, NACSA. She said, con. She was ready to go. All right. As you heard there, I host a sports radio show here locally in Houston. Do some TV as well. And I just want to say I'll be here all week. But to many of you out there, I do not mind talking sports. I just want you to know, like my man Jason from Buffalo, Kariga, my football team is better than yours. I do work here locally, but I am from Kansas City. So I am a Chiefs fan. And I'm just saying, if you want to get in that conversation, Kariga, who's a Broncos fan, if you want to get in that conversation, I have no problem with it, but just understand, I'm going to be honest. I don't mean to hurt any fellas. I better stop with Kariga. I might not get paid for doing this. All right. Again, hopefully everybody has a good time. Before we jump into things this morning, I want to introduce Mariam Barishis. She is the Director of Advocacy and Strategy Analytics at City Fund. Remember, City Fund is sponsoring this morning's keynote session. So, Mariam, please come up and join us. We are waiting to hear from Mariam. Here she comes.
Morning and welcome to Houston. My name is Mariam Barishis. I'm happy to be in my hometown representing City Fund. City Fund partners with local visionaries to transform public school systems in cities across the country. Currently, we are supporting 17 cities, leaders in 17 cities, in work that has led to 135 new schools. And those schools will eventually serve 82,000 students. My own journey began about 25 years ago at KIPP Academy Middle School, the first KIPP school authorized in the state of Texas. That experience was life-changing for me, but that also is where I saw firsthand the importance of strong authorizers and their ability to set high expectations, high standards, and ensure accountability. And that is a mission that we all champion here today. So thank you all. And that is also why we are thrilled to be supporting NACSA, a tremendous partner in this work, in this mission. We are going to be here over the next couple of days, so please do say hi. City Fund partner Ethan Gray will also be here, so come say hi. We'd love to meet you and answer any questions you may have about City Fund and our work. Thank you.
Please welcome back to the stage your NACSACon host, Ron Hewley.
All right, thank you so much. And I better play this right. By the way, you guys can still sit up here in these VIP couches. I do, fair warning. It is a rock up type of seat. You may have to make. Did you get that? You may have to. Yeah, she got it. You might have to make a bit of a grunt when you come up there. But they are very comfortable. So if you want to, you can come on up here. So let me make this right. My man Kariga. Kariga, you all know Kariga. We're going to hear from him now. Great guy. Fantastic person. Just want to make sure I get paid. I felt like I got you a little bit in that first one. I want to make sure I'm in a good spot. But let's hear from one of the great leaders here, Kariga Roush.
Please welcome NACSA President and Chief Executive Officer, M. Kariga Roush.
Appreciate you. Thanks. Yeah, I didn't know part of my job was going to have to be to fire the host. But my staff told me that I can't do that. So, Ron, I guess you're all right. It is such an honor to be with you. And truly, thank you, Ron. And good morning, everyone. It is really my pleasure to welcome you to NACSACon 2024 here in Houston. And it is great to be with dedicated authorizers, policymakers, school leaders, and advocates that are pushing for quality options for kids. Now, much of what you will experience this week is due to the incredibly hard work of NACSA's staff and the leadership of its board of directors. Staff and board members, please stand to be recognized. We are also extremely grateful for our conference sponsors this year. That includes City Fund, that we heard from here before, NWEA, the Charter School Development Corporation, Report Well, Afton, P Squared, Schoolworks, Geographic Solutions, Education Advanced, Create Ventures, and our longtime sponsor, the National Charter Schools Institute and Epicenter. Thank you all so much for your partnership here today. And finally, to the many partners who have collaborated with us to make change on behalf of kids, thank you. Your contributions mean a lot. For all of us in this room, the work that we do is not easy. It's demanding, it's consuming, and it's often exhausting. But it's also the work that transforms lives, not just for children, but for their families and entire communities. And that's why we are here. This week is a chance to reconnect, re-energize, and recommit to our shared vision. And that's ensuring that every child has access to a high-quality school that works for them. And that's a vision that gives us both joy and purpose. As we dive deep into conversations and sessions, let's remember something that's at the very heart of what we do: innovation and accountability. These two ideas aren't just buzzwords. They are the driving force behind our efforts to create and sustain great charter schools. Without innovation, we aren't pushing the boundaries of what education can be. But without accountability, we aren't ensuring that all students are achieving high levels that prepare them for their future. It's not either or, it's both and. And at this moment, the work of authorizing has never been more urgent. We've all been through a lot these past few years post-pandemic. We're all aware that student learning isn't recovering as quickly as we had hoped. We see too many students that are disconnected from schools and from learning. And we see jaw-dropping numbers of students that are absent from school altogether. Authorizing can be a force to address these trends, but it will require us to lean more heavily than ever into our DNA. And that's embracing innovation that produces real, measurable outcomes for students. You see, innovation is in our bones, y'all. We, the charter sector, have pioneered new models of education because we've had the courage to take calculated risks that have paid off for students. Just look at the wide diversity of educational approaches that have found a home and are growing in charter schooling. From schools that focus on the classics, to those helping students navigate career and technical education approaches, to those with intentionally diverse student bodies and more. Also remember that the very best charter networks all started with one courageous authorizer saying yes to one unproven schooling idea. And look at how many hundreds of thousands of students' lives are better because of those decisions. Tapping into the innovative brilliance of communities, especially communities that continue to be overlooked and undervalued, is demonstrating what's possible for students. Your work has shown that there is no one-size-fits-all approach to education. And we got the receipts. As more and more data and studies come out, it's clear that the work of authorizing and charter schooling is the most successful school improvement initiative our country has ever seen at scale. And that's especially true for students of color and those from low-income backgrounds. And there is emerging evidence that in places where a significant number of students are in charter schools, all boats rise. That is, student learning improves across all public education. That's because you have never shied away from embracing innovation and accountability. And that's where the important concept of accountability comes in. We must stay committed to requiring strong student outcomes, not just in pockets, but across the board. It's not about chasing the newest shiny object. It's about setting high standards and sticking to them, no matter the model or approach to schooling. We must demand success in core competencies because those are the building blocks of a successful education. And that means never shying away from holding schools accountable for high rates of literacy, numeracy, and more that we get from state assessments. Our sector cannot contribute to misleading students and families on how well prepared they are for their future because of lower standards or relying only on subjective measures of performance. We have to make the tough calls when schools aren't getting it done for students. Some schools need to close despite their best efforts, and we need to help students find a better option. Other schools need organizations that specialize in school improvement to foster partnerships so they can improve. Now, having rigorous, high expectations does not mean over-regulating schools. And unfortunately, we are seeing some problems. Problems like a narrow definition of what can count as a credit, or not embracing mastery and competency-based learning. We are seeing charter application lengths and processes becoming unwieldy and shutting out too many people with powerful ideas and strong execution teams. We are seeing schools, even high-quality schools, spending too much time on renewal processes that should be streamlined. Now, whether this is due to state policy or authorizing practices, it's important to aggressively address barriers that are getting in the way of talented school teams using their autonomy to do whatever it takes to strengthen student learning. We have to create the conditions that attract and foster the next breakthrough opportunities. But having rigorous, high expectations does mean remaining open to new, expanded ways of measuring success. We need to pay close attention to the authorizers in states who are piloting innovative approaches like new ways of assessing student learning, leveraging artificial intelligence-enabled tools that offer real-time insights on student progress, creatively measuring critical thinking and problem-solving abilities, crafting objective and rigorous school-specific goals, and measuring how students are doing in other important life outcomes. As the measurement of student learning evolves, we have to be open to new and rigorous ways of evaluating how students are doing. At the end of the day, you're not just gatekeepers. You are innovators and champions for change. It's our responsibility to demand excellence, embrace innovation, and expand what works so we can help all students thrive. We can contribute, we can continue to be at the vanguard of quality innovation because of our unrelenting focus on embracing ideas that increase student outcomes. So as we gather over the coming days, let's keep one thing top of mind. Innovation and accountability must go hand in hand. This is the time to connect with your colleagues, to problem solve, and to learn from one another. Our best work is more vital than ever, and students deserve nothing less. Now we have such a treat for you. It's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Elan Samoa. Elan is the CEO of Transcend Education, a national nonprofit that works with communities to create high quality and equitable learning environments for students. Before co-founding Transcend, Elan served as Chief Schools Officer at Rocket Ship Education, where he led the highest performing network of low-income schools in California. Elan's expertise and insights have been widely recognized, and we are grateful to have him take us deeper into how we can create an even stronger future for students. Please join me in welcoming Elan.
Hi, everybody. Great to be with you all. Hi, honey. How was school today? We all know the most common answer. Fine. This one little word represents the most urgent problem facing humanity. I said it. At best, fine means school was decidedly mediocre. I passively took in some learning, basically did what I was supposed to do. In many cases, that fine reflects deeper disengagement, disconnection, and even powerlessness. In the worst cases, young people can't even muster the word fine to mask the pain or boredom they're facing at school. So why am I saying this is such an urgent problem? Well, a young person in the US spends 15,000 hours in school during their 13 years from K to 12. A priceless opportunity for young people to master things that will set them up for success. How students spend those 15,000 hours goes a long way in determining whether they will thrive in adulthood. And how students spend those precious hours goes a long way in determining how we function as a society. Whether our hive mind acts out of tolerance, reason, empathy, and understanding or not. Name the social issue you care about: climate, health, democracy, equality. What 55 million young people are doing in school for 8 hours a day has a real impact on anything we want to achieve as a society. The adults are not going to fix the world, right? Whitney Houston was right. The children are our future. I dated myself, but it's okay. As adults who care deeply about K-12 education, we know this. And we know millions of educators, from teachers to district personnel, and they're working tirelessly day in and day out to make learning as awesome as possible. I've had the great fortune to see thousands of classrooms as leader at Teach for America, at Rocket Ship, and now Transcend, which I co-founded in 2015. I'm personally so grateful for the educators who shaped me and who worked so hard for my own kids, 13 and 8, every day. In addition to these educators, students and families are also working really hard to make the system work. Yet, 1 in 4 students were chronically absent from school last year. Math and reading scores are basically the same as they were 50 years ago, with stubborn gaps in scores, attendance, discipline incidents, and graduation rates for the kids furthest from opportunity. Strong charters are making progress on closing these gaps. But for the average student in our country, fine is the best we can expect, especially as they end near the end of their 15,000 hours. So what's going on with our schools? Well, most of them are based on the industrial model, which was created over a century ago to prepare farm and factory workers. Is it really a surprise that there's a fundamental mismatch between what our schools were designed for and what we need from them today? We need graduates who are curious, self-driven, collaborative, and prepared to take on the challenges of our world. And there's good news. We know more than ever before about the science of learning, and we've never had better education tools and technologies to apply that knowledge in the real world. We know that students learn better in intellectually engaging, emotionally connecting, and personally empowering environments. Experiences that support what Todd Rose calls their jagged profiles, the strengths, needs, and experiences that make each of them unique. Think about a time that you were wildly motivated to learn. Chances are you felt some combination of engaged, connected, and empowered. For me, it's the pursuit of music. I'm a jazz and Brazilian guitarist on the side. And it's exactly how I feel when I'm learning. I'm fully engaged in the pursuit. I'm connecting with other musicians. I'm connecting with the audience. I'm empowered. I'm in charge of my own learning about how I practice, what to practice, how I learn. I'm actually the opposite of fine. I'm totally on fire. Our goal then is to achieve this kind of extraordinary learning for all young people. And extraordinary learning for all means we center both experiences and outcomes for young people. The experience of learning enables outcomes, to be sure, but experiences are also crucial ends in and of themselves. As John Dewey famously pointed out, education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself. So if we're going to move past this industrial model of school towards learning environments that are engaging, connecting, and empowering, we must center student experiences. We think about the move from the industrial model to these kinds of environments as leaps. For example, in the industrial model, students experience school as passive recipients of learning. We need to make a leap towards learning, students driving their own learning. In the industrial model, students experience learning in the enclosed bubble of siloed classrooms. We need to make the leap to learning that happens anywhere and at any time. Let's explore this further by looking at a couple of specific examples. We'll start with an example we are deeply familiar with. I would argue that our best charters have made leaps from the industrial model of school towards the kinds of learning environments we want for young people now and that the future demands. Specifically, two dimensions of student experience stand out. Here's a common vignette when I visit a higher performing charter school. I'll ask a young person, how is this school different from the last school you attended? And I will get some answer that sounds like, well, in this school, the teacher thinks I'm smart and that I can do hard things. You've probably had similar interactions in your own work as educators and on school visits. A young person who notices this difference is speaking to a critical leak from the industrial model of school. Namely, the industrial model is designed around unequal opportunities and variable expectations for students. Let's not forget that just 30 years ago, it was generally acceptable to say, well, look, some kids can learn and some can't. The idea that we can and must hold high expectations for every student is a very good example of how schools have fundamentally changed the student experience by making this leap. And when you have high expectations for everyone, you don't just accept surface level learning. That is the hallmark of industrial era schooling. You insist on deep and rigorous learning. You do hard stuff. And thus, you're making another leap. Valor Collegiate is another beautiful example of a community that is making leaps. It's a Nashville-based CMO serving 5th to 12th graders built on a powerful human development model called Compass. The Compass model guides every member of the community, adult and child, through their own adaptive developmental process. Every member of the community develops their own inner compass and is constantly refining and strengthening it through both individual and group practices. I can't tell you how powerful it is to see a young person share vulnerably in a circle of her peers and then to be met with resonance from these peers who say implicitly and explicitly, we see you, we've got you. This child is way more likely to be learning in her executive state today. The parent voice in my head says, thanks for making sure my child is loved. The citizen of the world voice in my head says, if this is how communities come together, humanity will indeed move beyond these divisive times. Through the Compass model, Valor has made some critical leaps. Whereas a student in the industrial model has an experience of school with a very narrow focus, a student at Valor experiences their whole self being at the center of learning. Whereas a student in the industrial model may feel marginalized, not seen, here a student feels the joy and safety of being affirmed and of affirming others. Where the industrial model was designed in ways that enforce isolation, here's an experience that is making the leap to deep connection and a sense of community. And let me be clear. The focus on these leaps have not come at the expense of high expectations or rigor from our previous example. Valor is the only CMO in Texas with an A+ rating on the state Dewey state school letter grades with a perfect score on all 4 key indicators: academic achievement, academic growth, growth of highest need students, and college and career readiness. Thus, we believe it is totally possible to make all of these leaps over time. Finally, communities need a conducive ecosystem. They need policies and incentives that reward this work versus those that might stifle it. When the ecosystem is oriented around making incremental improvements to the industrial model, then communities, as we've seen, will be blocked from making the leaps we've described. When the ecosystem enables and supports communities to do this work, they will get the necessary wind at their backs. And as communities make these leaps, they in turn provide the insights and proof points that help the ecosystem become more conducive for the next community. From wherever you sit, you can play a role in this story. Maybe you're in a community and you're leading the change alongside other stakeholders. Maybe you're an authorizer, making it more possible for charters to do this, or a funder providing resources for this kind of work.
To invite Anirban Bhattacharya up to join us. Anirban is a former teacher and TFA core member in the St. Louis Public Schools and is a managing partner at Transcend, where he focuses, amongst other things, on education tech implementation. So really grateful to have him join us. All right. Let's talk about how this looks in real schools and on the ground. Had some fantastic examples that Elon provided. And in Anirban, I know you've got some additional, kind of tangible examples of what, this community-based design and kind of engagement process really looks like that I think can provide some important insights. So Anirban would love to just hear some of your examples of innovation in community centers and qualities actually playing out on the ground.
Yeah. So I'd love to talk about a network of schools that I got to work with in Chicago called Intrinsic Schools. And what was really fun about working with the Intrinsic team, charter founders are all entrepreneurial, and they got into it because they saw a vision of something new that they could provide students. And so a lot of charters that I've worked at or with, they get really excited about their solution to those challenges. And they use that solution to talk about their successes, to replicate their model, to attract funding. And that's a great result of the charter movement. But what was great about the Intrinsic team, they were creating great solutions and products, but they were really obsessed with going back to what challenges that they were solving. And so even though they were creating models that others were coming and looking at and replicating or wanting to replicate, every few years they looked back and they're like, this we can improve here and we can improve there. And this constant cycle is what made working with them really exciting. So some of the areas that they wanted to improve in their network were personalization. They realized that, if you miss that day of some concept, that shouldn't be your only opportunity in learning that concept. And so how could they have more personalized opportunities for students to address the needs that they have? They also wanted students to have more agency. They wanted them to make choices about how they learn, when they practice the guitar, when they practice certain topics that are taught in school. And then they also talked to their graduates and realized that there's more that they could do to prepare students for their post-secondary paths. And so, they had been open for about 5 or 6 or 7 years before we started working with them. and had reached the top in terms of that accountability system. So I think Chicago Public Schools was their authorizer. They had the best score in their accountability system, but they were going back to those 3 areas, and we're trying to figure out how can we further improve those. And so they evolved those experiences. And so, for example, they wanted their program to be more personalized for students. So not only were teachers building content for personalization, but they started adopting other models, Summit Learning, which was created by another charter network, as a way to achieve more personalization. They sort of wiped out 20% of their week. And every Wednesday, they called it C Day. And half of that day, students chose which subject areas, which teachers they would meet with based on the things that they needed to work on. And the second half of the day, they got to do student-led and teacher-led clubs and activities and sports during the school day, which a lot of students could only do after school previously. And then they also totally overhauled their advisory program. So we know that like math and literacy and science, there are standards. They figured out what are the standards that we need to teach during this advisory period, and how do we give those experiences to kids. So I remember during the design of this, we talked about everything from filling out financial aid forms to like, should kids learn how to scramble eggs? I think they should learn how to scramble eggs, because they were talking to their alumni and they were talking about all the things that they had to do for the first time. And so what was really awesome is that, after a couple of years of working with them, they had the opportunity to start a new school. And so they had to basically scale those practices to a new school. And because of their iteration and design muscle that we helped them with, they realized that a new school is a new community. And so there's new teachers. They didn't have the teachers that had been with them for 6 or 7 years. And so what made sense for that new school, while very similar to their original campus, there were some key differences. And I don't think they would have gotten there if they wouldn't have reinterrogated, well, how do we get personalization, agency, and post-secondary preparation with these kids, with these families, with these teachers in this building that looks different, in this part of town that's very different from the other part of town. And that community-based process is what allowed them to grow and to have another successful school.
Fantastic. Elon, do you want to add something, right, to some of the on-the-ground realities that you're seeing in schools in this model?
Yeah. So I was saying to Krieg, I actually took my but rising ninth grader next year is going to ninth grade to visit Intrinsic to consider it because I live in Chicago. And I will say, as an aside, the chances of him getting in, given that they have 5,000 applications for like 100 spots, is very low and was very frustrating for him and for my wife. We need more options. But in terms of the experience of school, the reason why he wanted to be part of it is that it felt to him like he was going to be in charge of his learning in a way that has not been true in his schooling till now. And not only in charge of his learning, but also able to be exposed to many, many things. So part of the power of this C Day is that it also provides the opportunity to do work outside of the building, both in pursuits that are interesting, like robotics or, pick your extracurricular, or actually doing internships and getting exposed to the kind of work that he'd want to do. And so it's been very special to see them create these experiences with, as you said, this spirit of curiosity and falling in love with the problem and not the solution. It felt like that magic is something we'd want to bottle up for schools everywhere to learn from.
And I'm really glad that you mentioned in your talk, right, a conducive ecosystem, right, that can really enable lots of different ways of approaching schooling, aligned with some of the things you had talked about as being possible, right? And we're seeing that in a lot of the works in the spaces that we operate in. You also have, right, a room here of authorizers, some policymakers, some school leaders, right, that are also thinking a lot about what may I be doing that's either getting in the way of these kind of opportunities, right? Or what are some of the barriers, right, towards new, innovative, community-based, right, kind of models for growing and emerging. Elon, I'm curious if you can say a little bit about kind of your thinking, right, around some of the things that may be, right, getting in the way, good, bad, or otherwise, but some things that may be thwarting some of the opportunities that we want to see for kids and families.
Mm-hmm. I think some of it you started to point to in your talk as well, which is, having watched the charter movement and been part of it at Rocket Ship. And I literally even saw this at Rocket Ship over those few years where the spirit of, this is, I think you used the phrase calculated risk. The idea that the whole point of this is that we can take those calculated risks, as opposed to guarantee me something. And I think literally that stance of you have to guarantee me something is, if we went back to the conditions for innovation, it's a conviction killer, because it essentially is saying only do what you're sure of. Like, that's the conviction you need to have if you want to even have a school where you're creating choice for anybody. And so I think that plays out in a lot of different ways. And it's probably some combination of how the authorizing and the funding come together, to either reward or incent do the safe path, do the incremental path, as opposed to, let's think differently. What's the problem you're trying to solve? And what is the process by which you're going to solve it? Like, we should be betting on the people and the process of change at least as much as the provenness of the idea. And I think that's both a technical thing, like there are things in the applications and stuff like that, as we've helped people do, but it's also a cultural thing. It's also, what is the ecosystem valuing? How do we talk about what we're trying to do in this community or in charters in general? And so there's not just one answer. I think it's a state of mind that we're trying to create through both the technical and adaptive influence that authorizers, funders, the district, et cetera, have on that community.
And I appreciate kind of elevating the idea of calculated risk, right, again, in that's part of our DNA. And the good news is that we have also demonstrated what excellence can look like at some scale. Which is also why, right, the importance of high quality operators that are doing great things for kids and families now, having, right, thoughtful, streamlined approaches for them to serve more kids, in addition to, right, not requiring proof that this is going to work all times, but being calculated and thoughtful around folks that have excellent ideas and the ability to execute on those well, being something that we continue to embrace. And so really appreciate the juxtaposition that it's not an either or, it's a both and in our work. Anirban, say a little bit from your vantage point, right, around some of the things that might be kind of getting in the way of more great schools coming online.
Yeah, I'm reminded of, so I was on a founding team of a charter school in Gary, Indiana. There was like 5 or 6 of us, and I was the youngest, but I remember my voice mattered, and there's lots of people looking out for me, helping me. They say, like, you get a seat at the table because we can all fit on one table. I also think we only had one table, and I think because I was the youngest, I had to build that table. But I had these mentors that showed me what great teaching looked at like when I was a beginning teacher. We would carpool together in the mornings. We would, go out to dinner after school and spend so much time together. And I just feel like I made so much growth as a teacher, but also as a human. And we got to do a lot of exciting things together. We knew our families really well. We were texting with them when they needed something, or we made time for music making with kids, and there was a lot of sort of like a wide variety of activities with kids. And I know as I got older and I moved from the classroom to sort of an admin position and supporting schools, I remember as we got bigger, like it was still fun, it was still challenging, but it was different. It felt different. It was a lot more of a narrow focus on like what are our outcomes for the year. I remember I didn't always feel like my voice was at the table. And I knew teachers felt that way as well. And so like what I would, like as going through my career, I didn't really feel that joy again until I was doing community-based design with campuses, where we had teachers on the design teams. We had students and parents on the design teams. Later this week, I have a convening with schools that parents are attending, and their voice gets heard. And what I would say is, how do we bring that magic again that a lot of charter founders feel, that they have strong relationships, everyone's ideas are being considered and reflected? How do we go back to that every few years to have that magic again and bring the teacher voices? Because in a lot of systems, teachers are the ones that are doing the most R&D and innovation, because they are being given all these things by their district, or they're seeing all these technologies available in the public. They're doing this R&D in their classroom. That muscle is strong in teachers. And so having them at the table to redesign parts of the school or introduce new types of activities that you want students to engage in, I think is one way, so that leaving the classroom isn't the only way teachers can show leadership or expand their scale, that they have a way in their position. You got to give them time and flexibility and maybe stipends and substitutes, which we sort of encourage our schools to do as well. But giving them that opportunity to design the experience, which is something that they're doing in their classroom, and they absolutely can be having a larger impact.
Fantastic. Just so good. So good. Couple of things as we kind of wrap up this part of our conversation is some of you may be thinking, okay, there's something here that I want to dig into a little bit more and understand a little bit more about. Maybe you're thinking about how, if you're a day-to-day authorizer in the audience, maybe you're thinking about, does my application process may need to evolve, right? To think differently, right? Around how I can be more open while still maintaining rigorous high standards for excellence. Maybe you're thinking about, how might my oversight systems and processes may need to think about and evolve. A lot of great opportunities there. There are two that I wanted to point out. One, we are fortunate that Elon is going to be doing another session right after this that will dig deep into these and other great questions. So we certainly encourage you to go to that session, right, to think and continue to engage on these ideas. And second, as he indicated, there are a lot of available resources. You've got now on your screens here a QR code to really think about some of the work that Elon, Transcend, and Nirban and others are doing in the space that we find ourselves in. So I don't know about y'all, but my brain is going in 500 different directions right now, right? With all of the great and powerful ideas around how the concepts of innovation, high expectations, community-centeredness, and accountability are not different from each other. They all reinforce each other to get amazing outcomes for kids and families. And I'm excited to be on this journey with you and am grateful for the opportunity to engage. Please join me in thanking Elon and Anirban. And I think with that, it's my job to turn it back over to Ron. During the little interlude here, my staff did tell me that because he had some smart things to say about my football team and his football team, that we'll see if your payment's in the mail.
Well, I guess I stepped in it a bit here. Again, thank you guys so much. That was a great conversation had.